Hello everybody, in this session we're going to create our calculations of the moving average and cumulative cases from scratch. As a reminder, in the last session we created them using the quick measures dialog. We started off by looking at this chart. This is our raw data, our daily cases, and we added our calendar table here. And once we'd added our calendar table, we got it working so that the days of the week were in the right order, and so were the months, and so on. And then we came to our calendar table and we set it as a date table so that the quick measures would understand and be able to use it. Finally, we went and created our quick measure, and here it is. We didn't do that directly. We came into modeling and we used the quick measure dialog. This time it's going to be different. We're going to create them from scratch. So let's get started. The first thing that's useful to do is to create an explicit measure for our cases. If we look at this chart here, which is the daily cases, we've got the cases numeric field on the value. If we drop down here, we can see that it's an aggregation of the sum. Whenever Power BI puts a numeric field, it always aggregates it. We've got 15,000 or so rows in this data set at the moment, and it's aggregated them down to about 60 rows. And this is basically it's summing by the number of cases by the date. Let's create that explicit measure. I'm going to click on the new measure button, and then I'm going to type in number of cases equals sum of the COVID cases, and click on check mark. And here we are on the right hand side is our number of cases calculation. Now let's add our new measures side by side with our original calculation on the bar chart, and we can see that they give exactly the same number. I'll remove my original calculation. The reason for doing this is that when we use number of cases in subsequent formulae, those formulae will be simpler. I've also created similar calculation, the number of deaths and the population. Now before we write a measure, let's understand about something called filter context. What we've got on this chart is we've got one measure, one calculation, number of cases, and yet for every date we have a different bar. And the reason for that is that the chart is filtering each day by that date. So for example, if we look on the 10th of March, we've got the number of cases as 3,300 and odd, and that's the number of cases filtered by the 10th of March. On the 9th of March, we've got we start off with the number of cases and filter it on the 9th of March. What we'd actually like to do, for example, for the 9th of March is not just filter on that date, but filter on all preceding dates, these four here, and that would give us our rolling calculation. Let's write it now. I've written the calculation here, and then we're going to build it up bit by bit. Let's have a look at the components quickly though. We've got a measure, it's called cumulative cases. It goes and grabs the current date. If it's a bar chart, it's current date of the bar. And then this calculate basically tweaks a base measure, a number of cases measures. And what it does, it says don't filter it just by the calendar date, but first of all, filter it by all calendar dates. And then that opens the filter and clears the filter. And then actually just use calendar dates less than or equal to the current date, earlier than the current date. So let's have a look at that bit by bit. This is step one. I've created a couple of simple measures, one called earliest date, with just the minute of the calendar date, and latest date. I'm going to take those and I'm going to put them on the tooltips of my chart, and we're just going to have a look. So as we come along to a particular date, it gives me the date, the earliest date is the latest date is the date 10th of April. So that's just giving us the date on the bar. Let me just explain a bit more. And what I'm going to do in the calendar is I'm going to take the month and put it there. So we look at it by month. And if we have a look at, say, April, we can see actually the earliest date is, because April has all the dates in the month, the earliest date is the 1st of the month and the latest date is the 30th of the month. But when we're looking at a chart which is by date, then basically the earliest date is the latest date is the date. So it gives us the current date of the bar that we're doing the calculation for. Right, we're just going to change the syntax of this latest date measure. So what I'm going to say var current date equals max date, and then what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to return the current date. Step 2 is to create a measure that just removes the filter from that calendar date table. So what I've done is I've started it already. I'm creating a measure called cumulative cases in brackets all, and this is exactly the line that we saw before that gets us the current date. And what I'm not going to return the current date, but what I'm going to say is going to use calculate, and then I'm going to say, what are we calculating? We are calculating the number of cases, and what we're going to say is we want to remove the filter. All is a table function that will remove the filter of calendar date. So let's do that, and let's close our brackets, and let's hope that that works. Let's take our new measure and bring it onto the tooltips so that we can have a look at it. And if we look at any date, we'll see that the cumulative cases all is always 1.17 million. That's the number of cases in the EU. So whatever date, we can see it's exactly the same there. As step 3 is to filter not on the entire calendar date table, but only on those rows which are earlier or equal to the current date. And the way that we're going to do this, first of all, what we do is we start off with the same calculation as before. I've just changed the name to cumulative cases, and what I'm going to do is, instead of doing the all, I'm going to come along and say, actually, I want to filter on this, and the way I'm going to apply a filter condition which says that the calendar date is less than or equal to on or earlier than my current date. There we go, and close that. Make the brackets work so it's easy to read. Have a look at it. That looks good. Now let's see if this cumulative calculation works. I'm going to come along and drag it onto a line chart which already has the quick calculation that we did before. And if I come along, we've got them, it's easy to see. If I click on that, that's my quick calculation in the red bars, that's the new calculation, and you can see that they're coincident, which suggests that it's working. Now let's see if we can create that moving average calculation, bearing in mind what we know from our cumulative cases calculation. I've created this line chart here which shows the daily cases as a line chart, that's so that we can visualize our moving average calculation. Let's go and build it. Now let's build that 7-day moving average calculation. I've started here with the calculation for the cumulative cases. All I've done is simply change the name of it, creating a new measure, of course. So what I'm going to do first of all is I'm going to create a new variable. And that new variable is going to be called week ago date, and it's basically going to take the current date for the current bar in the bar chart and subtract a week from its 7 days. Now, the moving average calculation is basically the sum of the number of cases from the current day going back a week, and then we've got to divide by 7 to, obviously, because it's 7 days. So we've created week ago date, and what we have to do is we have to change our filter so it's still less than the current date, but the calendar date is going to be greater than the week ago date. And so that will give us our 7 days, and what I will do is divide by 7 to get an average. Let's see how that looks. We're back on our line chart that shows the daily cases by date, and I'm going to drag this 7-day moving average and put it on. And at a first look, it looks reasonable. It seems to be lagging it. It seems to be averaging over the 7 days. That looks good. Let's have a look at this formula again and maybe try and explain what's happening here. Imagine that we're looking at the line chart, and this is going to be calculated for every date on that line chart. Let's just take a particular date, say April the 12th. As it comes into April the 12th, it's going to set current date equal to April the 12th. It's going to set week ago date to April the 12th less 7 days, which is April the 5th. It's then going to return, that's what it's going to return. It's going to return the number of cases, which is the sum of the daily cases. but not just for the immediate filter context, the 12th of April. It's going to say, actually, I want you to use the dates. First of all, it removes the filter from calendar date, and then it applies a filter saying it's going to be less than the 12th, less or equal on or earlier than the 12th, but it's going to be later than the 5th of April. So it's going to give us a set of dates: 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 7 dates in April. Because it's the sum, we have to divide by 7 to get the average, and that's what gives us our correct moving average.